This webinar is about preparing for an interview. First and foremost, you want to have a winning attitude. You have to want the job, so shoot for winning. Shoot for that offer, not just for doing well in an interview. Preserve your option to turn things down later by assuming that the job is the best one for you and head into every interview with that mindset. There's no such thing as only a screening call. Every interview is a potential rule out, so be prepared to interview every time you answer the phone. Every communication could be a potential interview, whether it's scheduling calls, whether it's just simply answering the phone as if you're getting an interview. Your tone should convey professionalism and enthusiasm every single time. Turn the interview into a meeting. It doesn't have to be an interrogation. Let it be a collaboration. So picture if you were meeting someone at a conference and you just really connected with them. You would talk about work in a really natural and enthusiastic way. You are hiring a company just as much as they are hiring you. You both have a problem. They need to hire a solution to business goals, and you need to hire a company to accomplish your career goals. Communicate your interest level and show your enthusiasm for both the company and the position. So, this is a little bit about shifting your perspective as far as how you think about interviews. There are two main types of interviews, being remote and in person. Traditionally, the goal of a phone and video interview has been to get invited for a face to face interview, not to tell your whole life story. However, we're seeing a trend towards full blown interviews being conducted via phone or via video. So it's smart to be fully prepared no matter what the format of the interview is. The goal of a face to face interview is to get invited back for a second interview or to receive a job offer. But what we're seeing is some of these former face to face only interviews are being conducted via other means or modalities such as video. Interviews can be one to one or in front of a panel of a few individuals. But for all interviews, get the names correct of all the people you're meeting with. Try to address them by name during the interview if you can, and check in with how things are going occasionally by asking, did I fully answer that question? Is there anything else you need to hear? Or is that how you wanted things done in this position based on how I answered that? Or is there something I can clarify? Checking in every now and then gives you a chance to take a moment, and it allows them to reflect on what you are saying. Many interviews, again, especially those initial interviews, but others as well, are being conducted via video. So, a few tips to help you prepare and make sure you're set up for success when video interviewing include things like test your internet connection ahead of time. Make sure that the speed and the bandwidth is there to support a smooth meeting. It's also good to download whatever virtual meeting tools or software that's going to be used to conduct the interview ahead of time if needed. So there's so many different platforms that are being used out there like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, and many of these are free. But before your interview, you want to make sure that you have the correct information to get logged in. And it is also a good idea to potentially exchange, let's say, cell phone numbers so you have a plan B to go to just in case the technology is not cooperating. You also want to prepare your interview space for a video interview. If you're doing the interview from home, choose a quiet, well lit space with a neutral background. It's important to remember that video interviews give a little bit of a peek into your personal life. So you want to be sure that your space is clean, it's free of distractions, etc. If possible, keep pets and other family members in another room during your interview. Try to turn off your phone and any other potentially distracting computer notifications. One of the benefits of virtual interviews is that you can have resources around you. So consider having maybe a large note card or a post it or notes pulled up on the screen that help you to highlight why you are the best person for the job. Also, dress like you're going in for a face to face interview. Even though you're not physically in person, you're still representing yourself as a professional and you want to look the part. You might feel a little foolish dressing up just to stay home, but appearance matters, even in a video interview, just as much as if you were in person. Also, practice maintaining eye contact with the camera. Almost imagine that you're making eye contact with the interviewer by looking at your camera. It's going to feel a little unnatural, but I recommend practicing this a little bit before your interview so you start to feel comfortable during the actual video interview. Also, say no to swivel chairs. Even if you have a really, really nice, beautiful swivel chair that you use in your office regularly, during a video interview, it's a good idea to switch that out for a chair that doesn't move or have wheels. In interview situations, we tend to be a little bit more nervous than we normally are. And oftentimes, when we're nervous, that causes us to fidget. And swivel chairs can actually accentuate that. And then no winging it. So, just as you would do thorough preparation for an interview in person, you want to make sure you do that when you're interviewing via video as well. And then finally, be genuine and be patient. So, when we're using technology, you don't want to let it get you flustered. You don't want to let it cause you to be stressed and not come across as your true self. And also, if others are experiencing technology issues on the other end of your interview, the best thing we can do for each other is to give each other a little bit of grace and be patient. So, preparing your space, a few tips to think about when you're going to be doing video interviews, making sure you have that neutral background that has good lighting. The best lighting, if at all possible, is actually to face your computer so that you have a window in front of you. Have that camera at eye level, which one makes it a little bit easier to give that eye contact, but two, it also is a more flattering angle. Consider having notes in front of you if that is going to help you. Make sure your camera works. And if you don't have a camera, get a camera and practice. Practice talking to the camera. So do a dry run with a friend or family member. So, skills and experience get you an interview, but who you are and how you do it is what gets you to the next interview or to the offer. It isn't always about total qualifications. So, this isn't an automated process. The person that gets hired is qualified enough. The person who's hired, it's really all about fit and capacity for their future contribution, how you add value uniquely. So be thinking about, how do you add value? Can you be pictured as a trusted member of a team? Let them know when you like something that you hear. Let them know how you're going to meet their needs and let them know that you're enjoying the interview process and enjoying learning about the company. Don't forget to let your enthusiasm shine through. If there are two equally skilled candidates, oftentimes the person who seems more excited and engaged is going to get the job. So, why should I hire you? This question itself can be phrased 1,000 different ways. Why you versus all the other qualified people out there? What risk do they have hiring you? Also, what value do you bring that others do not bring? Know what they are really asking about your value. Speak about that value. Just as you are a unique professional, every job you apply to is unique as well. As part of your interview preparation, take stock of your strengths, your values, and skills. Identify how they align with the organization and what the organization's looking for, as well as the challenges that that organization is facing. Prepare those talking points, those examples, and those scenarios before you head into an interview. So let's talk about preparing for that interview. Each of these represents something that you should research. Also, you'll see a number of logos on here. These are great places or sources that you can use to find those things out. For example, Google, Vault, Glassdoor. YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, all examples of things and resources for information. And you want to be thinking about or researching things like the different products and services that the company has within their portfolio. Who is their target customer or target customers? What other jobs are open right now? What is the mission and the vision? What are the value statements of the organization? What are their goals? If they're a public company, look at their most recent annual report and search different news and announcements about the organization. These are types of things that can really help you to feel prepared and empowered and well researched heading into an interview. So, understanding the job and adopting the language. So, notice the difference in the language and the tone and the approach of the job posting that you applied to, or other job postings as well within the organization. What do you think these two companies are about here? So, if we look at the language we have as a market research analyst, you will use your curiosity and passion for market research to help continue the positive growth of three unique retail brands. Or, as a market research analyst, assist in multivariate and custom statistical analyses for multiple studies in order to deliver on unique ability to market research and have business impact. Those are two very different styles of writing, and that tells you something about the organization, about the job. One at the top, I would say, is a little more people driven versus the one at the bottom, that's a little bit more data driven. So as you look at that, you think about that and you analyze that, that gives you a lens to head into the interview with. So really, for either job, there will be alignment in terms of work, but the vocabulary used might be really different. Consider integrating some of those terms. Now, there are a few main types of interview questions. First, behavioral questions. This type of question includes things like, can you give me a specific example of how you did that? And what were the steps you followed to deliver that result? The purpose of behavior questions is to objectively measure past behaviors as potential predictors of future results. This is where you can do a lot of preparation before an interview. One acronym that I recommend for that preparation is CAR. CAR is where you give the context of a situation, the action that you took, and the results that it achieved. And what you can do is you can come up with a number of these CAR stories ahead of an interview. Think about things like a time you dealt with a difficult coworker or customer, a time you solved a really challenging problem, or a time you had to think out of the box. There's so many different versions of situations you can use. But if you have those talking points down and you have these stories in your back pocket, you can then tailor them to a number of different behavioral interview questions that you're asked. Next, we have situational interview questions. These are kind of hypothetical. They ask you to put yourself into a speculative situation and explain what action you would take. In many ways, they're similar to behavioral interview questions. Then there's historical interview questions. Here's often where you're asked to walk someone through your career history or your resume. So it's giving a more in depth response to this question, maybe lasting about 2 minutes. It's your opportunity to highlight the parts of your resume that you believe deserve attention and give more information about these points. You might want to briefly mention your education, tell your interviewer why you chose your last educational institution if that's relevant, or your major. And if appropriate, add some context to your resume. Make sure you mention different leadership, industry experience, etc. Unless you're taking an entry level job, next you want to mention your job history. If your job history is long, the two most recent positions should suffice. If these are in the same industry, make sure to note any experiences or responsibilities that you believe will help you in this role that you're interviewing for. And if you're transitioning from a different industry, you might want to mention why your experience there led you to decide a career change is what you're looking for. So, since this question is commonly asked, it's a good idea to plan out your response beforehand. Don't wing it. This will give you an idea of how long your answer is and whether you need to add information or eliminate any unnecessary details. And then there's zinger questions. Some of these, although it can look like a number of different things, these are a little more unexpected, or it can be something that's harder to prepare for. One example of a zinger question might be a question like, um, if you're a new addition to the crayon box, what color would you be and why? So, just to give you an example there, there's not actually a right answer to what color you would choose. Instead, what they're looking for is for you to share your thought process and kind of show how you think through or critically think through your answer. So if you choose a color, don't just say the color, but explain why and tie it back to the job or the company. So, key themes and behavioral questions that can help you to kind of prepare and think about some of these scenarios that you want to have talking points to might be people or conflict, relationships, positive, negative mindset, how you communicate or influence, and this could be how you influence or communicate up, down, or across the organization. How do you prioritize or business acumen? How do you accept criticism or learning opportunities? How you deal with stress, deadlines, and change. Not an exhaustive list by any means, but give you some good examples to start with as far as preparation goes. So, reading between the lines, you want to listen for themes, not wording. So, as you read these questions, tell me about a time you had to adjust quickly to changes. Tell me about a time when you had a conflict. Tell me about a time when you successfully influenced senior leadership to adapt to change. Tell me about a time when you had to go above and beyond in order to get the job done. Or tell me about a time a project you worked on didn't work or failed. So, usually, or sometimes, when an interview asks a question, there's a question behind the question, and you have to discern that real question. So, in some of these, when they wanted to hear about a project that didn't work, they don't necessarily want to learn all about a project that didn't work, but they want to hear how you handled it, how you overcame it, and what you learned from it. So, keep that kind of thought process in mind as you navigate these types of interview questions. A couple other situational example questions. What you want to do here is give an example of a similar situation from your experience. If you don't have a specific example, discuss the ways you would anticipate handling the situation and demonstrate how you've approached unfamiliar circumstances in the past. And maybe even consider following up with a question. So, asking them, how does that compare to your expectations, or how you feel someone would be successful in a situation like that? And then answering specific interview questions, specifically these zinger questions. What did you like best about your last job? What did you like least? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And if you could write your own job description, what would that consist of? Another kind of example of categories of these little bit tough questions. They want to know how your opinions and goals align with the opportunities, the metrics, and the expectations of the job. So, for that reason, you want to make sure you do your research. For example, if they ask where you see yourself in 5 years and you say you see yourself as the CEO, but the CEO is actually the person who started the company 20 years ago and is nowhere near retiring, that answer is not going to get you any brownie points. So, although that might seem a little bit silly, just giving you an example of why it's so important to do that research before you head into this interview situation. So, here are a couple of frequently asked interview questions. One, do you feel you might be overqualified? So, this is a concern that I hear often. So, how do you want to talk about this? You want to talk about your passion for the work. So, I've held higher level strategic positions, but they weren't as satisfying to me as this role. And although I've always been successful in every role, what I really have a passion for is being where the action is, or going into specific information about what the role you're interviewing for encompasses. You may also need to address or reinforce appropriate salary expectations for this concern. So something like, I realize my last salary at the VP level is not within the range for a director position. I'm deliberately targeting a director level position, and I'm just expecting fair market value for the scope of this role. And another common question that comes up is, do you have a degree? If this question is asked and you don't yet have your degree or don't have the degree specifically that they're looking for, there's a few strategies that you can consider. Communicate how you've invested in your professional development. Talk about the specialty training programs and certifications you've completed. And tie your work experience to the different education advantages as well. Don't forget to verify your communication. So don't miss an opportunity to check in and make sure you fully address the question or concern. So there's a number of examples on the screen here to showcase how you can do that. Another way to actually do that is at the very end of the interview to say, is there anything that I did not address today that would hold me back from being fully considered for this position? And that might sound simplistic, but sometimes that really will give you an opportunity to address something where you have a ton of experience, excitement, or passion that just for whatever reason didn't come up in the interview. And don't fall for traps that ask for negative responses. We always want to try to stay positive. Focus on what you do know, what you did do, or what you're looking for in the future. So, comparative terms like strong, weak, more or less, what you're doing is comparing you against you, but the interviewer hears you against others. So just be careful with the language. Don't say, I'm not strong in that technology. Instead, say, I've used that technology to do X, Y, and Z. This way, you're giving facts, but you're not putting out that comparative or that comparison that could be perceived as being negative. All right. And succeeding in the interview, questions you should ask. So, as you've probably experienced in a lot of interviews, at the very end or at some point in the interview process, you're going to be asked if you have any questions. And it is a very good idea to always come to the table with something. So, you could ask, how do I compare to the ideal candidate? Or do you see any barriers to my success in this role? Do you have any concerns that would stand in the way of hiring me? What are the goals of the department? What does success look like in the first 30 days of this role? What are the most critical priorities? Again, by no means an exhaustive list, but it shows that you are engaged. It shows that you can see yourself in the position, and it shows that you're prepared by coming to the interview with a few questions that you can ask them. And then finally, after an interview, you do want to make sure that you follow up and show appreciation. One of the best ways to do this is with a thank you letter. Now, I get the question all the time is it appropriate to send a thank you email? And my answer is absolutely it's appropriate. Decisions oftentimes are being made pretty quickly. So you don't want your thank you letter to get lost in the mail or take too long to get there. So I actually recommend, yes, make sure you capture the email addresses of anyone that you interview with and follow up quickly after the interview with an email of appreciation. It's a great opportunity, as shown in the example here, to solidify or express a few of the reasons you feel you're a good fit for the role based on specific things you learned about the role, the company, and the team that you had a chance to interview with. So, next steps, prepare for that interview. Review some of those common behavioral interview questions and prepare some of those stories and talking points that you can use to be successful.